Let's continue the conversation on the artisanal miners. We're joined by mining and energy analyst Ted Blom. Ted, thanks for your time tonight. I imagine the question for many around the country, especially those who are artisanal miners, is when can we expect to be next on the list? How fair an expectation is that?
Well, look, artisanal mining has been around Africa for hundreds of years, and the rights of artisanal miners have always been under a cloud. I remember a delegation seeing the first Minister of Mines in the new government, Minister Botha, and he promised that he was going to do something about that. And it's now 24 or 25 years later, and the artisanal guys are still suffering under a very unclear regime, and basically have never had the inspiration to become organized. And I think it's only by becoming organized that they will actually have a voice.
Given how long this trade has been in existence on the continent and even in South Africa, do you think that part of the delays in the legislation and even the language that we're seeing around miners, you know, because they're called illegal miners often, do you think that part of that is problematic?
Absolutely. And I remember about 10, 15 years ago, there was an entrepreneur who tried to legitimize and corporatize the so-called artisanal miners. The company's name was OTR Mining, and the idea was that artisanal miners will operate their own little digging operations and then bring it to a central point where it will be valued and then some efficiency brought into the system so that they don't have to try and do all the activities on their own. And that's a big problem with artisanal mining. Today you're mining and tomorrow you're trying to sell your produce, and the day thereafter you've got to come back to your mining operation and somebody else is there. So it's very, very disorganized. And I think the only way that the government can add value is to actually legitimize it and to give the guys some inspiration to corporatize. I mean, there must be a mechanism similar to OTR that will work.
So how it's also described is often that this is theft, that these miners are stealing from mining companies who own some of these mining rights and who own the properties.
Well, no, that's indeed true. And the reason for that is because they're not legitimized. They're not allowed to apply for their own permits. They're not allowed to, or they're not allocated their own mining area, and hence the next and most attractive thing is to scavenge what the big mining houses have done. And in terms of that, the statistics are that around about 30% of this country's gold and platinum disappears via the artisanal route. But that's because they're not legitimized. If you legitimize them and give them a business to run, they'll run that business.
But does that not then create tension, or what kind of tension does it create between the artisanal miners and, of course, the big mining companies? Is this something that the mining industry as a whole would be open to?
Absolutely. I mean, the big mining companies do what you and I would call bulk mining. So they come in with big machines and they take where the bulk of the ore body is. On the peripherals of the ore body, there's always more ore. And that's where perhaps you could use a junior miner, or in this case, artisanal miners, to do the complete cleaning up. Because it doesn't make sense that you invest all the time and money and you don't take all the ore out while you're busy in that particular area. So I think there's a complementary role that can be played. But the first step is that they need to be legitimized, they need to be recognized. As long as you treat them like scavengers or crooks or whatever, you're creating your own chasm to their recognition.
But of course, that also then comes with its own pros and cons, because one would be, the first one that comes to mind is safety, is that once it is legitimized, then what are the safety frameworks that need to come into play in order to ensure that loss of life does not happen at the scale that we've been seeing it happen, especially in South Africa?
No, absolutely. And to that extent, the framework maybe needs to be broadened a little bit to make provision for joint mining on a given area. Currently, you have one person in charge and responsible for safety and health on any given operation, and that framework can easily be expanded. But by encouraging these guys to partake of the formalized structure, you then legitimize them and then subject them to the same health and safety regime.
Do you think that we're going to see the department continue in this strain?
I've met Mr. Mantashe many years ago. He's a miner in his heart, and I'm sure he understands the problem. And if anybody can sort it out, Gwede Mantashe is the guy.
All right, I'm sure he'll be happy for that vote of confidence. Mining and energy analyst Ted Blom.